Welcome to Scrolling to Death. Today I have Dawn Wible, the founder of Talk More, Tech Less, an organization focused on digital wellness and safety. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Nicki. Glad to meet you.
And please tell me I said Wible. What is it, Wible?
Well, I was going to say it's Wible, but everybody says Wible.
People, so mine's Reisberg and people say Reisberg every single time, which I'm totally fine. But I was on a live news interview last week and they said Reasonberry. I was like, oh, it's like, and you can't correct them on a live news.
Right. No,
So sorry.
I would have said that too. So I'm glad you corrected me.
Thank you. Okay. So that's relatable. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Okay. So tell me about you. Let's get into what's your story, what led you to create this resource and to advocate in this space.
Yeah. So I'm the founder of Talk More, Tech Less, and I'm a former educator. So I was already in the schools with kids, and my husband runs an outdoor mentorship group. So and both of us have been in the lives of teenagers for over 25 years now. So we really saw the digital shift happen in the lives of teenagers. And that's organically how we got started. We were at summer camp and they were supposed to give up their phones for a week. And that got harder and harder and harder over the years. Yeah. They started giving away their Snap passwords so that people could keep their streaks up while they were gone for the week. Yeah. So we started to see this early dependency in those early years on phones and on social media, specifically Snapchat even. But so we just created these boxes. We call them the detox box and kind of talked about how we're going to set our phones in these boxes and give yourself a break from your phone. We know that statistically now, people are nearby our phones for 22 hours a day. So that's a huge part of our life. Our technology is just a huge part of our life. It's nearby. We use it for so much. And so I started to just look into it and realize this wasn't just an issue with the youth that we were working with. It wasn't just an issue in our own marriage. It wasn't just an issue in our state or in our country. It was global, this shift that was happening. So I started to those early years, it was like 2013, do a little bit of research on what was happening. And I formed Talk More, Tech Less and started going into schools. And I really make connections with counselors because they're the ones in the schools that are seeing the issues arise with students and technology. And I do online safety trainings and digital wellness trainings in the schools. So that's the short answer for how I got started.
Yeah. And a long time ago, like over 10 years ago. And were you really kind of frustrated for a long time? Because I feel like there wasn't a lot of positive changes maybe until the last year or two regarding legislation and lawsuits and things.
Absolutely. I mean, I say we were doing these trainings for 10 plus years and talking to parents and parents coming up after saying, we're doing all the things that you're recommending, which really forced me to get more involved in advocacy and in legislation. And that's, I have had connections over the years with other organizations doing this work. But yes, being in it for 11 years now is, it's been a long time. And so I'm so thankful for the groups that I'm a part of now, and working on legislation because we know this is just such a beast and education's important, but so is advocacy.
Yeah. So, let's talk more about that because you mentioned parents would be like, we're doing all the things. And I know I've interviewed a lot of parents who've lost a child and many of them had all the monitoring, had all the conversations, delayed devices, and the harm still happened to their child. And where does the fault lie? And it's hard when you actually realize that these platforms are instigating the harms, you're like, how is that allowed? There's a right and wrong here and they're wrong. So that's how I realized oh God, we need to pass legislation. And I only started this podcast a year ago and I'm like, here's the Kids Online Safety Act, yay. And then I'm like, oh my, and I'm learning really fast how hard it is because big tech is fighting so hard against bills like this. But are you feeling more hopeful regarding the advocacy piece and the legislation in the last year or two?
Well, absolutely. I mean, in 2017, it was kind of an awareness campaign before, hey, there's a problem, almost like warning people for all those years. And sadly, now we're looking back and seeing all the loss that has happened, and seeing all the changes that need to be made. And one of the aspects of my training, one of the modules that I cover in my digital wellness training, is about ethics and tech ethics versus our own ethics and our values. Like they're so different. And so when you look at what the technology industry, big tech, what they value and what they want, it's not the protection of our kids, yet they're using these products. And so it's why I'm so thankful for voices like yours being able to tell the stories, because there's only so much research that brought awareness and brought any action. But when you hear the stories, that is really what has moved the needle forward over this last year. And I'm just grateful that I found the group I found. So about 3 years ago, I reached out to the Screen Time Action Network and became a part of the Online Harms Prevention Work Group, which is half survivor parents who have lost their kids to online harms, and the other half is professionals in this field just being concerned about kids and their safety online. And so it's child psychiatrists, it's pediatricians, mental health, all kinds of areas of people coming together and saying, how are we going to grab hands and move this issue in front of Congress? And so it happened this last year. And I'm so thankful. I was thankful to be, and you were too, in DC, being able to talk with senators and congressmen and tell the stories. That's really what's changed.
I do believe and can see and agree that elevating the human experiences and the kids' experiences behind the harms is really important. And I try to spend a lot of time getting to know the kids in the stories, because I think that helps other parents like see mutual characteristics like in their own kids and realize that the not my kid thing, like we can't think that way. Like this could be anybody's kid, these deadly harms happening to them, and that's the worst of the situation. But, your kid is likely to suffer from anxiety or depression or all these other like lesser issues, still very serious issues when they're accessing social media and these addictive feeds. So, and you mentioned you focus on digital safety and digital wellness. So I want to talk about digital safety first, because that's where my head's at, since I'm lucky that my kids are all under 9. And so right now I just want to focus on protecting them. I don't want them to access these platforms. I want to keep them safe and kids as long as possible. And so my plan is to just not let them access social media like at all, unless it's forced to be safer. I know that that's going to become unrealistic at some point, and I do need to work on the digital wellness area and educating them on how to access these platforms in a safer way. Like, what would you advise me around keeping my kids safe? Is it completely unrealistic for me to just keep them away from it? Or do you agree that like the risks of social media are so great that it's just better to keep them off of it as long as possible?
Yeah. I mean, the number one question that we get is, when should my kid get their first phone? When should they get their first social media account? Yeah. And can I protect them from this? And right now it's not safe for kids to be on the platform, especially the age your kids are at. But I'm also a mom and I have 3 boys. So I'm walking this road in addition to teaching it and learning all about it. I mean, it's happening in our homes. I have a senior, I have a sophomore, and then I have a middle schooler, brand new middle schooler. And my middle schooler is the only one in his age group that doesn't have a device at school. And even, the small things of like, Mom, everybody's texting their parents where to, park and where they're going to be after school or different things like that. So we're navigating those waters of, well, we're not there yet. There's all different options. It's not like the moment they get a phone, it's going to be a smartphone opened up to everything in every app. There's all kinds of different levels, dumbing down your smartphone or having different products like the Apple phone or watch. And then lots of other products out there. And so we did delay with our kids. We delayed phones. We delayed social media. And I think that as much as they felt left out, it was the right thing to do. And then we talked about all the issues. I mean, our organization's called Talk More, Tech Less. So
Mm-hmm.
we told the stories. We told the stories to our kids in really age appropriate ways. And that's another big part of the training, is to say, make your home a safe place, an open
Mm-hmm.
place to be able to talk about these issues with your kids, so that they're hearing it and they're aware,
Mm-hmm.
because all of their friends have devices too. And so we see, like you said, we see some of these stories where parents have done everything.
Mm-hmm.
We know of a parent, their kid didn't even have a phone, and they still unfortunately lost their kid to harms. And
Yeah.
so we know that it's the big reason why I'm doing the legislative work, is to say that this isn't on the parents, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
on the schools, this is on the companies, and these are products that they're pushing into our culture, into our kids' lives, and while they're keeping them away from theirs, we all know
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
keeping it out of their schools.
Totally. Yeah. So the tech executives are largely not giving their kids devices, not early. They're delaying. They're going to schools where they use very low tech. So we should all take something from that for sure. Yeah, I really just truly feel like delaying is the answer regarding all of it. But at some point, we have to introduce these things to them, all with conversations while the delaying is happening, like you mentioned.
Yep.
But we're lucky that we do have a lot more options now with different watches that are made for kids, or phones like the Bark phone or Gab phone that are made for kids, that are safe from the ground up. And then you get to add on what you feel is appropriate for your child's age group, rather than trying to lock down an iPhone that was built for adults and has a lot of bugs and issues for kids.
And honestly, I have a lot of parents that ask, why don't you just focus on safety when you're doing your trainings? Why do you spend time talking about wellness? And one of the most important things for families to understand is that if kids aren't well, they're not going to be safe. And if they're not safe, they can't be well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that unsafe environment a lot of times happens from that area of not having good, healthy boundaries around our technology, and good, healthy boundaries in these different areas of our life. So one of my examples of that is we really focus on sleep health, and we focus on creating a room and an atmosphere that's set up to rest and to be able to fall asleep. And we talk about screen time before bedtime. And we know that kids that are up late on devices, isolated in their rooms, are more at risk. And so being able to tie in why it's important for us to have these healthier habits around our phone use is going to actually help protect our kids a lot of times. Not all the time, as we know. That's not always the case.
Yeah. And I always find when I talk to experts and educators that talking to your kids about what's good for their brain and what's going to help them grow and stay safe, like those are all things that a kid can understand at really any age. And I also appreciate your note about sharing the stories of harm age appropriately with your child, because a lot of parents have messaged me saying, I've been sending these videos to my teenager who's maybe on Instagram, or just texting it to them. And it's easier when it comes from you. Like they're like, they won't listen to me, but if they hear it from you, they're like a little more open to it.
Right.
And then also I've been talking to a lot more youth. What I'm realizing is that we think our kid, when they're faced with a harm on social media, is going to be able to recognize it as a harm and judge it appropriately. But then I have someone, like I interviewed Harrison Haynes, who's a grooming survivor, and he has been telling his story. He's 21 now, but when he was 12, he was made a friend on Xbox and ended up grooming him for about a year and a half. But he said, I didn't know it was wrong at first. Like there was no warning bells. Kids don't innately know that some of these situations are wrong, especially when they're being contacted by like a cartoon-like character on Snapchat that looks to be an innocent friend, and Snapchat's telling them that they're friends. And so it's a lot for our kids to expect our kids to understand what's wrong about these situations and that they're getting themselves into. So we have to introduce a lot of these topics that maybe we don't love doing, introducing hard topics like this to they're not fun conversations, but introducing the harms to our kids, especially if they're active already on social media, we want to be the ones to teach them about the warning signs for sextortion or grooming or plugs and drug dealers and all this stuff before they learn about it from social media.
Exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about devices. What do you think about, are you a fan of maybe starting off with a watch as the first device, since we do have that option now?
As far as the wellness side of things, I'm not a big fan of the watch, just because of how it can really distract so much. I think if you do go with a watch, to make sure that your settings are set really high on do not disturb, so that kids, it's not just buzzing while they're at school or buzzing while they're on, playing with their friends. They're not interrupted a lot. So that's just mine. There are tons and tons of resources out there. But I think just starting with a really dumbed down phone is probably the best. That way it's not attached to you. And that kind of goes back to our detox box when we call it a home for your phone. And so you actually have a break from the device, and neurologically what that does for your brain and what that does for your relationships. There's a study called the mere presence of a phone. So even having a phone present during a couple might be out to dinner, and just having the phone present there on the table makes them feel less connected because because it's there. And so just thinking about things like that as you're preparing, your kid. Now, when it comes to safety, that's why I say they both go hand in hand, because you have to think about, well, I might need to get a hold of my kid. And so a watch may be a perfect option in, some scenarios or some situations where you just need to be able to get a hold of them. And so, there's so many different options out there, to start with, but I would say if you're starting with their first phone, to have a really basic phone for them to be able to walk away from and still have all the activity in their life available to them.
Amazing. Okay. I've been really curious about the watches because I see so many parents putting the smartwatches on their kids at like 3, 4, 5 years old. And I just wonder, and we don't know yet, but how these kids will grow knowing that they've literally been attached to technology and had no independence and no freedom and constantly being tracked from the time they were basically a toddler. Like it can't be good. Can't be good, right?
You're right. And we won't know. I mean, I think that's the hard thing about it is, like we've said a million times, we're all a big experiment. And this whole thing is a big experiment. We're going to look back and I think see a lot of the data that comes out of that. And I know we've talked about the anxious generation, and he's got some unpopular views in that about childhood and how helicopter parenting, the safety thing, is Jonathan Haidt does a great job talking about what that's doing to kids. And I know that with my own kids. I mean, they know they can't get away with anything at school because they know there's cameras everywhere. They're like, Mom, that couldn't happen. There's cameras. They already know that they're living in this world that's they're always on, surveillance everywhere, and they're attached, to everything. And so I think the more ways we can give kids a break from that, the more they're going to feel that autonomy and be able to have a little bit of independence, even in the culture that we live in. So it's a hard balance. I mean, we go to a big school. We go to a big public school. My kids have ed tech everywhere. They have kids around them that have technology. And so I would love to say, let's all go move away on a farm and not have any technology in our lives and not have it be a part of us. But that's not our reality. It's a big part of our work. We're able to connect right now because we're using it as a tool. And so it's such a big part of our lives. And how are we posturing it in a way that it's serving us and not mastering our lives and taking over our lives?
Yeah. And I mean, adults struggle with that, right? Like using technology just for a tool and not a toy and not distracting us or wasting our
Yeah.
time. But kids are at such a disadvantage because their brains are not developed and they're definitely going to be more drawn to the toy aspects and the entertaining aspects of technology. But then we are also giving them access to platforms that are built to be addictive to them. And so, right, that was why we have to help them balance and delay and choose safer devices for them, and then train them for how to be an adult in the world and not be distracted all the time and not be able to focus and do their job and the things that they need to do to be a productive citizen, right?
Right. Right. And
So,
I know that we talked about earlier schools, and I've seen some of your story coming out with what's going on with your school.
mhm,
And I had 10 years, 11 years ago now, similar situation with the one-to-one iPad coming into our district.
mhm.
And so we were talking about, how we can make sure that that's safe. I had a teacher, my student's teacher, he was in second grade,
Mhm.
and she said, I want you to come look at these iPads and just take a look because I know the work that you do. And we just got him, and I just don't know if this is a good idea.
Wow. Yeah.
This was 11 years ago, and I did. We made an appointment. I opened it up, easily was able to access pornography on there. Um, I mean, we typed in the word fun and I got to the word you, which any kindergartner could, open up and type in the word fun right when we F you, and all kinds of stuff, auto
Oh,
populated.
Jesus.
And so, right.
Oh my God.
So we went to, and then I just typed in other things, just random things,
Mhm.
and, ended up taking pictures, going to the, IT department, and talking through some of this stuff beforehand, and talking about the Children's Internet Protection Act, that the school needed to be protecting them with filters. And we were looking at the filters they were using. Anyway, long story short, this same district is the district that my kids are still in right now. I do the VIP, very important parent night at the start of school every year. We talk a lot about digital safety and wellness, and am very active in the district. And so I'm thankful for, um, there was for sure resistance at the beginning,
Yeah.
because everybody's scared to get in trouble. But I think the most important thing is for schools and parents to realize that it's going to take everything. It's
Mhm.
going to take the legislation. It's going to take educating kids. It's going to take us working together, and to
Mhm.
realize that we want to keep kids safe. And
Mhm.
so it's a hard thing to balance that. Yes, I'm an advocate for the school, and yes, I'm an advocate for my kids, and
Mhm.
yes, I'm an advocate for parents that have lost their kids.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be one person that fixes it. There's not going to be one organization that fixes it.
Right.
It's just being in it long enough, you can see that this is what it's going to take, is everybody
Mhm.
being able to come together and say, these are not safe. And what
Mhm.
can we do to protect our kids?
How did you break through the school barrier? Because my issue has been that it's a very like us versus them thing. Like when I come with a concern, I'm being gaslit, must have been user error, or we're already doing everything. We have the best filtering monitoring software. Okay, well then why was I able to easily get served a self-harm video on the device? Like we're not on the same page. And I've tried to suggest free training for Organization for Social Media Safety, like free resources. Bark has a safety monitoring for schools for free, and they're just very resistant. We don't need any help. We
Mhm.
got it covered. And I would love to come in and do like an event at the beginning of each year and talk about what I've learned as a parent and an advocate. But that does not seem, they're not open to it at all. So how do you like break through that headbutting situation that a lot of parents are dealing with their schools?
Right. And my story with this particular school isn't everybody's story. And
Right.
I do know that that's not everybody's experience.
Mhm.
For me, it was time and a lot of research, bringing them a lot of research,
Mhm.
and being able and offering them tools, saying, I know this is an issue,
Mhm.
but here's what you can do, rather than this is evil, take it all away.
Mhm.
Um, And, we've seen the shift in public school systems over the last 10 years of their books are, gone. Now we have flexible seating and we have desks that don't even hold books because everything's moving toward iPad. So we're seeing this big progression happening in the schools. And I'm not saying to like align with that, but to continue to show the evidence of what's good for kids, what's safe for kids, and what the laws are saying. Because so many times they don't even know what the laws are saying and that they can be held liable or that the kids are actually getting in trouble. There's laws that are being built around what kids don't even know. And so that's where the importance of combining both education and legislation, because we have to be educating about these laws so that the students know what is illegal and what they can and can't be doing on their devices. So yeah, I would say in my school, I'm an ally. That wasn't always the case. It's just been time, just been staying consistent and offering resources to them.
Okay. Yeah. And I think I tried real hard to be an ally for over a year and offer resources that were always turned down. And then for me to find that on the device after specifically asking about YouTube being removed from the devices. And my option now is just to opt them out completely, kind of as a stand to be like, you guys got to do something real here to protect the kids, and hope that will, hopefully I'll get a comprehensive plan. It's looking like I may, for how to long-term opt out up to a certain grade. I don't know what that's going to look like, but then other parents can take that option as well if they'd like, especially in the younger grades, because I do believe we've gone too far. Through COVID, obviously we needed to integrate one-to-one with the tech, and then we should have taken a step back and looked at how it was affecting the kids and gone back rather than keep pushing and pushing and getting more and more things online. An example of that is my school district was celebrating at the board meeting that they just got SEL, social and emotional learning, moved to the tablets or to the iPads, which I looked around and everyone's celebrating and I'm like, what world am I living in? That is absolutely not something that should be taught from a device. So yeah, it takes parents being like, hey guys, you're all, puffing each other up over something that is really not good for kids. So who's questioning you?
Well, the other thing I was going to say is taking it really to the top. I've had a couple districts say the administration is saying how frustrated they are with teachers because teachers aren't, they're using their iPads all the time, or they're not standing with the kids and interacting with the kids. They're at their own desk. And I talked to administration about how all of that has to come from the top, because these teachers, and coming from a former educator, I was in the schools, so I knew everything comes from the top. So you sent, after and during and after COVID, everything moved virtually. And now you're expecting teachers to just go back to lesson plans and doing things. So you have to make the shift from the top and then filter it down into the schools. So most of my meetings are with superintendents, with school boards, with the principals. And if I do have an issue with a teacher that I can deal with just the teacher on that, I will. But yeah, it's administration that I usually am contacting and connecting with.
Yeah. I realize that too. You send it to your principal, they're going to pass you on to the district anyway. Is there any resources? So I've shared with parents who are listening, I've shared just my template of what I sent to my school and some questions to ask their school about tech safety. Is there resources that you provide or recommend to parents around this topic of device safety at school?
Well, one of the big issues we're walking through right now is the phone-free school. And, they have the phone-free school packet. All of that's really helpful when you're talking about cell phone safety. And then there are a couple different filters and monitors. There's some school districts I work with that are using the BARC monitor on the ed tech, but they're not using it on the phone side of things. So they're not using it with the devices, but they'll use it with the school issued iPads or Chromebooks. And so, those are two of the main ones that have been really helpful for schools. Is both of those resources.
Yeah. And so I'll link to the Fun Free Schools movement. I think there's like their admin toolkit. And they have a lot of good research sort of organized in a really pretty way of why phones should not be accessible to kids at school. What about research to support less device use regarding the ed tech? Or I know that research is harder to find, but is there somewhere you point to or somewhere that you would recommend parents pull from to try to support their request for safer ed tech use?
I think the most current is Jonathan Haidt and Jean Twenge. I mean, to have that be such current research, that's really a helpful tool for schools to look at. But like I said, I think it's really hard. Where the area that I'm in, they were all in on the one-to-one, and you can see the all of the kids that are even homes are getting printers, iPads, everything in America. Let's get all the kids attached to these devices. So it's going to be a big shift I have had a lot of conversations where people are saying, why don't we just go back to textbooks and pens and papers in schools? And in the private schools I work with, that is definitely an option. But in the big public school systems, it's just not going that way. So having those conversations of how to have media literacy, how to have digital wellness is really important, because we're seeing, and really also talking about the younger grades, showing a lot of the evidence about early brain development is really important. In the Action Network, Screen Time Action Network, we have an early childhood group, and they have a toolkit on the website there for young brains, and why it's so important for them to have all kinds of interaction besides just screens.
Okay, amazing. And I'll include all those resources in the episode notes. And we've talked a lot about schools, parents, I encourage you to speak up regarding device use at school and whatever you feel passionate about, and accessing these resources. But when it comes to our decisions in the home, what do you like to recommend parents be thinking about related to screen time, gaming? Like, what are some of the things that stand out to you that parents should take away?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things and most important thing to do is to have some form of, or some place of like a detox box or a tech charging place where that's where phones go at night. That's where phones go to charge. Having a home for your phone, having a place that's not attached to your body is a really good practice to not have kids constantly have it in their pocket or on them. So I think that's just a simple thing that everybody can think about. How can I make a little tech station in my home that we know we can go set our devices on? And there's lots of options out there. I know the schools are starting to use Yonder. We have a detox box on our website. There's a couple different options out there for a home for your phone. And the science in that is not, there's not much out there yet, but we were doing this before we even knew that was really good for us. So I think that would be one area. And then really getting to know whatever your device's screen time settings are, sitting with your device with your kids. We've talked about that with some of our teenagers. We'll sit down and we'll go over, what does downtime look like? What does these screen time settings? My son has a job and he has his focus turned on so that only his boss, my husband, and I can get a hold of him, and he's not getting all the group texts from friends blowing him up while he's at work. So there's just different settings that you can do. Now we know that Apple and the screen time parental controls has just been a nightmare for a lot of people. So there are definitely there's software out there. And we have some recommended on our website that you can use to help with that. But those are some of the things. Just really setting your home up to be a place that's downtime. You have some time away from devices.
And I think trying it too for the adults in the house, like putting that device away. And I mean, there's even some adults that are like, I just don't want it in my room at all. Like I'm hearing that lately. I just went back to an alarm clock in the bedroom because it makes me feel so much more rested, so much more calm, and having that disconnection time. I know that's not realistic for everyone, but the settings, knowing what you do have available. I mean, I hate iPhones for kids, but I appreciate as an adult having an iPhone and being able to set do not disturb or focus settings. I also have the one where if it gets too close to my face, it like something pops up and you have to back it up and then wait, and then it loads, and then you have to click a button. I swear to God, every time that happens, I just put my phone down because I'm like, I don't want to have to wait a couple seconds for it to reset. And that helps me to put it down when I'm definitely like spending too much time with it in my face. Right.
Right. And that comes from the eye health and the distance of having the screen so close to our eyes, which is a big issue with kids that are gaming and have their phones real close to their eyes. And
I've talked to some doctors who are like, kids generally, their spines are becoming more curved from looking down at the device. Parents tell me all the time, my fifth grader comes home with a headache and his eyes are hurting and he's in a bad mood. And it's because he's spending 5 hours a day on the Chromebook or on the iPad.
Right. In our we do a section on physical health, and we talk about myopia in kids and nearsightedness, and that having that near work always in front of their eyes, and how it's really affecting eye health and then spine health as well, being able to set our technology up. But after my trainings, I always have parents come up after. They were like, this was good for my kids, but this was so good for me. I needed this reminder for my own, just how I'm setting up my technology and my habits. Because we want to be healthy too, right? I mean, we're their mirrors. So being able to see mom and dad make healthier choices is also beneficial for our kids in the long run.
Yeah. And that's been an interesting thing to think about. A lot of parents may be resistant to some of the information about social media being harmful. I find resistance. And I feel like that is a lot because if we all admit that social media is generally addictive and harmful for children, it's also the same for adults, but adults are also addicted to it and don't want to have to put it down. So it's hard. It's hard for parents to be like, okay, this is bad for you, but I'm going to be using it all day. And we also need to take a look. We do need to take a look at our own behavior and how these platforms are affecting us. I've been able to take a really hard stance on TikTok. Like, I feel like it's exploitative, it's manipulative, it's a national security threat. So I don't believe that anyone should be using TikTok right now, especially our politicians after passing a law saying it's a national security threat. And then you have both presidential candidates on TikTok. It's like, what is happening? Parents being more open, to absorbing the information that could be beneficial to them, beneficial and helpful for their own health and balance, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we know that as we make those choices, it's going to be hard. I mean, I can tell the days that I'm scrolling more, the days that I need to set better, healthier habits for myself. I can tell that my mental health is affected by those choices that I make. And so, it's really important for us as well to pay attention to that. And our kids will see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been thinking about remember Social Dilemma in 2020?
Yes.
I was wondering, I haven't watched it since 2020, but I was wondering at what age I should let my oldest watch it. And she's going to be 9 in a couple weeks. And I'm feeling like maybe now.
Yeah, I actually recommend it. It's just a good awareness piece for people to see the difference in, I have parents that say afterwards, I feel a little bit of relief and anger after watching that, because my eyes are open that all of this addiction stuff isn't on me. This is actually due to algorithms. And there was a bill that I testified on in Texas. And I was testifying next to a 16-year-old, very courageous 16-year-old who had self-harm content pushed toward her through the algorithm. And I remember thinking, I wish that this bill wasn't just for teenagers. I wish we could turn off the algorithms too, right? Because
Yeah.
my feed is full of, in one way, it's full of things that I'm interested in. But I miss just seeing on my feed the people that I want to see, the people in my life that I want to follow, instead of it just being constantly them choosing what I'm seeing.
Yeah, what a relief that would be. How interesting to go back to that. And I know California Governor Newsom just signed a law that will allow or will force the social media companies to provide a chronological feed for minors. Now we're waiting for big tech's crony organizations to sue over it and try to overturn the law and, all that legal process. But yeah, I would love that. And I think that it's also interesting to compare like an adult account, which the algorithm is harmful and manipulative, but it's the type of content that adults are getting served is actually better than what kids are getting served is what is being found. So parents will say, well, my feed is just what I'm interested in. And they don't understand that they're seeing different things than kids are.
Right. And kids are targeted. I mean, they're targeted with that content, that harmful content.
Yeah.
And people do not realize that. I have a Talk More Tech Less Instagram account, and one of our posts talks about how my feed is different than your feed. And it goes, I just scrolled up on my feed and it's recipes, it's, lots of fun content that, I enjoy watching. And then you open up someone who's 16-year-old, you open up their feed and they don't even have to be clicking on some of that stuff to get it fed to them. They're just targeted because they're that gender and that age. So
how backward is the world? It's so horrible.
So parents do feel like this isn't as harmful as, I will say that the families that I am with and interact with the most that have the healthiest and really I would say even safer habits on social media keep social media social. And that's how I say it. We keep it social. You're following your kids' accounts. You're commenting on them. Their grandmother's getting to see their homecoming pictures. Those kinds of things with the right privacy settings have been the healthiest versions of social media. And usually that's a Instagram or Facebook. When you're getting into Snapchat, it's a total different story because that's more a social setting and statuses. Than the other one. But it is interesting to think of the ones that are more isolated, the cases that are more isolated that are getting more targeted.
Yeah. And I will tout Apple one more time that I appreciate their shared album feature because I create a shared album for each of my kids and I give access to maybe even a dozen family members or close friends, and that's not technically fully secure, but that's where I share content about my kids so that I don't have to hand it over to the social media companies and then encourage my family to spend more time on social media, I guess, is how I look at that. But it's nice that we have an option that's not social media to have a feed of family photos that feels a little bit safer, a little bit.
Yes. Yeah, it is. For sure. It's not a public platform for everybody to consume.
Right. Okay. So any other thoughts around how parents can get involved in advocating for positive changes around this area that we didn't talk about yet?
Yeah, I would say start small within your community, and maybe that's your group of friends, and just start to get awareness around it. There's different, we have on our website, we have a smartphone ed, so a group of parents can get together and watch. It's kind of how kids getting their first phone, how to set it up with privacy settings, location settings.
Great.
They get to hear conversations from other teenagers and even early young adults, kind of college age, about some of the safe things that they did, choices that they made that helped them stay more connected with the people in their life while they were still starting with technology. And I have a lot of different, you can imagine being in this long and having all the different sides, people that are, very low tech, people that are very high tech. I encounter all of it. I have all of it in my life. And so it's such a nuanced situation that we live in because we do use technology for most things in life. But at the same time, we know how important and how healthy it is for us to take time away from it. So we
Mhm.
just really try to have an open conversation where we're not canceling everything and canceling everybody about it.
Mhm.
But we're saying, here's how we can step forward. Here's how we can hold the tech companies accountable for what they're supposed to be accountable for and stop blaming each other.
Mhm.
And how we can get together to work on the same team to
Mhm.
move this forward in a positive way. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of competition that's gonna make this happen. Competition
Mhm.
is the opposite of what we want. We want to collaborate and work together.
Yeah. Absolutely. And stop blaming the parents. Like stop blaming
Right.
parents because parents are trying, we're trying our best and we're fighting a losing battle. And that's why we do need to advocate and we do need to speak up for legislation. And right now that's the Kids Online Safety Act, right, is our
Yep.
best bet at getting kids protected on the federal level and putting a
Yep.
duty of care on these companies. So parents, if they listen, they already know that you should contact your representative in the House, ask them
Yeah.
to co-sponsor COSA if they don't already. Um,
Absolutely.
and okay, I think we covered a lot. I think that's good.
We
So,
did.
how can listeners connect with you at Talk More Tech Less?
Yeah. Ironically, I'm the most active on Instagram, which
Me
still
too.
isn't very active.
Right.
It's not very active, but I am on there.
Okay.
So if you want to follow Talk More Tech Less and just see some of the ways that we're involved in this work, that would be where you can find us. And then of course our website,
Yeah.
talkmoretechless.com.
Perfect. Okay, Dawn, thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you for working on this for so long. I can't even believe what that journey must have looked like because already my brain is exploding from the amount of information and different perspectives and like resources and legislation. So I'm grateful that we have someone like you that's in it for the long haul and like willing to put in the work and create actionable resources for parents. So I'm going to link to everything that we talked about. I think I have like 10 different things. So parents will have lots of resources to browse. And then let's have more conversations in the future too.
Okay, let's do it. It was great to meet you, Nikki.
Thanks, Dawn.